Thank you, Mark, and thank you for the invite. Yeah, so I'm the researcher in the room, I guess, and I will try to give you some of my perspective on those the questions and issues that have been discussed here. So this is my lab, so it's not a huge lab. It's like in the 12-ish people lab. Some of them are actually, doing crochet. I think it's an interesting lab. It has an unusual sort of a feeling in the lab. So I also think that they are the ones that are really good at crochet are really good at coding. I mean, that's anyways. So where do I come from? I've kind of a long time ago developed some successful software or co-developed some successful software. I've invested a lot in community building aspects. So today I'm rotating out, but I'm chair of the INCF Council for Training and Science, and also worked on large projects that are trying to share data and code, such as the Open Neuroscience platform, the Canadian Open Neuroscience platform, and as well as some large project at McGill as well, like NeuroHub, and I've also have been kind of bugged by the problem of publishing research objects in general. I think that's one of the thematics, and so I therefore worked on a couple of projects to actually change the landscape in that respect. This is where I come from. I want to, the slides are not exactly presenting the way, but it doesn't matter. I want to start with a couple of examples that hopefully some of you know already, but maybe. And the first one is the one of Potier et al. At Duke University a long time ago. They had a great idea of how to analyze cell data, to actually look at the genome of those cell data and see whether they are resistant or not to certain drugs, and then look at the genome of patients, and then see whether those drugs, and predicting that those drugs will be effective or not on those patients. And they went up to the point where they had actually a clinical trial going on and so on. And published in very prestigious journal, which is legitimate in that aspect. But Bagley and Cohn were two biostats, and they're from the universities. They were asked to help researchers, biologists, to actually redo those things, and also they started to dig and try to redo the analysis. And because the data were available, which is kind of amazing, there's a reason for that, but they could try to redo everything that was in the papers, and basically they couldn't. And so they did this forensic analysis where they looked at all the ways that there could have been mistakes in the data and the software, such that eventually they found out how the initial authors got their results. And the thing that I want to point out here specifically is that the first initial thing seems to be that there was a little research software that took two arguments, two Excel spreadsheet kind of things. One of those Excel spreadsheets had to have the header, and one of those didn't have to have the header. So it's like a recipe for mistake, right? It's a very bad design, but research software, they're not really, they're just for the papers, right? So they concluded that the most common errors are simple, most simple errors are common, and it's a very classic. And then the story goes on. There was cover up and all those problems, it was like but that's not what I want to point in that story. It's really like the initial stupid little mistake, of shifting a line in an Excel spreadsheet. And it was mentioned that Excel spreadsheets are the main tools for research, right? The second example, which I point to for another reason, is that of this I think very good researcher that in crystallography looked at was using a software that was coming from a very reputable lab, and using that software for analyzing this. Okay, and there was obviously a little bug in the software, and there's this -1 that was actually mirroring the structure of the protein, and therefore he had to retract all those PNAS science and other papers. So I think it's kind of a very emblematic to me of the incentive aspect. We have now containers, and they really have changed the landscape. But there's a lot of problems in terms of analytical flexibility. For instance, if you're using two different software for doing the same kind of task, I'm in the neuroimaging, brain imaging sort of field. If I want to segment the hippocampus, I have like, a possibility of 5, 6, 7, possible software to do that. If I use all those software, I can tell you there will be very different results. And there will be results that are so different that they will impact the science, certainly. Now, software are not really tested. I mean, good practice in software development would give you unit testing framework and all those things. But there will no, I mean, that's the good practice of like a scientific testing aspect. I think is still more or less missing in many of the areas, at least in my area of research. So what do we do? So I've separated this little talk on 4 things. I want to talk about how do we do with the new generation. I think bringing up the new generation. Also talk how we talk to the old generation, and then I would like to just say a couple of points on publishing and sustainability and governance aspects. I will take an example for that. Yeah. So in terms of the new generation, there's this classical way of data science where you need to have a bit of computer science, a bit of stats, a bit of obviously your local expertise, and on those people that have all those things are called of unicorns. I think that's unfortunately we are lacking one of the big pieces, which is development, installation, deployment aspects, which is completely out of the scope of most of universities' programs. Code and software reusability, peer review publishing aspect. Who is teaching apart from the PI? If that PI is kind of aware, students to actually know how do you publish those research objects. Ethical and legal aspects, that's also like something that is in the PI minds, but not really in the student one. And the reuse, and reuse of the of all the what are the best kind of tools that the people can have for training, for instance. So I'm pointing to the carpentries. So training the old generation is harder, much harder, because the brain flexibility is not there. I mean, that's. I want to point to a little experiment that we did in Nature Neuroscience, where we try to get like if there is software involved or code involved in an article, can we have specific reviewers for that article? And it's kind of worked a little bit, but then got dropped, I think. And so how do we actually convince deans and provosts? So I was at the data site workshop recently, and there was someone from Duke University and says, oh, that's that potty story is actually the thing that convinced the university that they had to change their behavior. So it seems like until there is a big catastrophe, nothing is happening, right? I mean, so I don't know how to deal with that problem, but I think we still have collectively a way. We should have more ways of actually influencing universities, deans and provosts, because that's where the decision and the shaping the research landscape can actually happen much quicker. The aspect of long-term versus short-term research, and maybe it's one death at a time. Maybe we just have to wait and train the new generation and wait for those guys to be in charge. I would also to say, like, FAIR is great, really, and I was, I think, part of the organization of Force 11, like when he was in Montreal in 2018. We really need to do the citation aspect, and I know that you are well aware of that problem and how and already have like a lot of solutions. It's not in the minds of most of researchers. I can tell you that. Yeah. So and when I say citation, I really mean like peer review citation, like peer review publication. I want to take, I don't know if Carol is on the call here, but I want to take her, like a quote on really what is critical is really putting the incentives back at the top of our list. So she love, fame, money, and rules. All right, and those are the 4 kind of incentives that our communities are working with, and then not everyone in the same with the same thing. Like researchers, maybe they love their work, they also want fame, and maybe publishers, they want more money than any things. And maybe you as founders, maybe you have a way of saying something about the rules, right? right? So crediting software needs really education of both authors, of authors, editors, reviewers. And the reality check is that many articles today don't actually cite the software. They don't even name the software they're using, right? They don't name the software they're using. Even recent articles, it's not like 10 years ago. So I think that there's something that has to change. It's quite funny and bizarre that it's not still the case, but it is the case. And the other reality check, I think, is that publishers won't probably care. I think publishers, their main thing is to actually make a flourishing publishing platform, and that's where the incentive is. There are obviously good resources and good things, and I'm pointing to the MIT ones here, but others exist also on the web. So the other thing, and I know that has been a topic of our conversation here, is that the authors are not credited because the publication of the software dates from 15 years ago, and that's a long-standing and sustainable software that's still. But the new authors and the new are actually not seeing that paper. That so I think there's also those problems that to be solved. There's I think a few number of journals that are dedicated to software. I'm crediting, and JOSS is one of the stellar example. I want to say. I mean, if I say to my chair of department or dean, oh, I've published in JOSS, and actually I did publish in JOSS with my postdoc, thanks to they would see that and say, okay, and then put that in the bin, because it's not their focus, their interest. So what do we do with the reputation aspect in our field than the specific field that JOSS is talking about? I think that's the. And to some extent, there's been a lot of work in looking at dark data and how much costly is that for society funders of dark data. And this study is for a long time ago, but it was assessed. It was like hundreds of billions of money lost because the data were not available and published. It's very unclear to me what would be and how you would assess that number for software. Actually, I think it might be an interesting kind of a direction to look at. So if I look at data and software, I like that pending things where like you have data site, we have site software, we have like the JDDC. Like a framework, and we have like the software header framework. We get a number of things that are, and I think looking at those parallels can actually help. I also love the fact that, we are using and reusing a lot of containers these days, but we don't have like a really cool data package yet, or it's kind of still emerging, but not very, prominent. But the thing I want to say is that the governance aspect of software or data is still, to me, like the big place where there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of work of education and a lot of development and education aspect. So the key issue of sustainability is great. I think it's in everyone's mind because we need money to go on. But I think critically linked to sustainability is the governance aspect. So I'm pointing to the recommendation for repositories in scientific gateways, which was a common work with the NCF. And they say be transparent in governance and operation, and all those principles we know, just not all of very often applied. Involve community in governance, again, all those things. But where are all the set of templates that we need to have to actually say, okay, this is the kind of project I have. Where's the template of governance that I can point to and say, hey, let me adapt that governance, and such that I have a better chance of being sustainable and being more useful for the community. And I'm pointing to a couple of governance papers. There's the one that is recently funded by the Wellcome that I think is for data that is interesting to look at. So there are so many size and type of projects. I mean, I can okay, there's a little project A that is a very big project, and those very big projects are often very centralized, or if not centralized, the governance is trying to centralize things because it's difficult. It becomes very political and very difficult to work in a proper governance with large projects. So I think I would point to that sort of like missing bit there, that, for a kind of project, what kind of governance aspect can we put such that there is sustainability and reusability by the community. I like personally having worked on small and large projects, I kind of start to prefer the medium-sized, small-sized projects. The one that I'm going to take the example of is actually funded by CGI, and it's a very decentralized team. The governance is explicit. There's a larger number of contributors outside. There's a very large user base. And I think you should fund more of those projects than the very large one. I think that's my. So everyone knows the bus factor in software development, and so I want to take the nylon example as what I think is a good project. Given all the not only because my lab is participating in it, but because really it has all the characteristics that I like. And I think it's not only the number of contributors or maintainers that is there. It's also the lab bus factor. I think we should really think of a project as a lab or PI or institution bus factor rather than a contributor bus factor. Because if I don't get the next CGI grant, maybe my friend in Europe will do, and maybe someone else at MIT will do. And I think that is really bus factor of labs aspect is to me is a critical sustainability component. It does have to have a really cool and clear governance aspect, because it's so much harder to collaborate with people than to do the things yourself, right? There's a overhead that is super high, whenever you start to collaborate with people. It's not only overhead of interaction, it's an overhead of how do we deal with the governance aspect. So funding sources are diverse as well, which is key as well. And it also has this, this project has also like a link to very, active communities. So the brain hack communities, the software carpentry communities, and all those things. So I think having all those criteria for what is a good project might be an interesting aspect for the room here. I want to, like a little plug on a project that we try to take exactly those criteria from the start of the project. So this is a project that is built to be under the ethical and social constraint that we have with data sharing in brain imaging. And it builds a distributed data sharing platform, but also distributed governance platform at the same time. So I think, and we're still a bit in the beginning of that, but right from the start, I really want to have all those criteria that I've described before in that project, and maybe try to do a template of those things. So what we do is we look at the Excel spreadsheet, and we basically have a small like an annotator that ships with a data model. So because you have a data model, the same data model, you can then so you annotate things, and there the UI aspect and the user, having the user in the mind is really critical. So we have designed really hopefully cool interfaces and UX aspect, and then when you have distributed this data model across different endpoints, you can actually query those things across those endpoints, and then processing and then getting back the processed data to the platform that you want to share with other people. What is important in that project is that the data sharing constraints of GDPR, the data sharing constraints of the psychology even of API are really taking into account at the start of the project, not after when things are starting to. I think that's what I would like to have. So really are relying on standards for that and community. So the key aspect really is distributed data governance, sharing and processing, user in mind, scalable and community standard based. So we use BID, we use Boutique, we use DataLad, we use all the NCF standards, developed with partners, and I think that's what the thing is. Last, and I won't take you, I won't prevent you from going to lunch soon. I think publishing is really one of the things that still is the sort of a pain point that I want to relate. There is data availability statements, they don't work. I'm sorry to say, like, they clearly don't work. There's been several studies on that. There's a response by authors that's very limited. And really, publishing platforms, journals are keeping the research community a little bit hostage because they have the reputation. There's no way you can actually not publish in some of the journals. So that there is a power play here by the publishers because they actually have the names and of the journals that us researchers we have to publish in. Right? That's the simple reality. So I think we do need to start to build those new publishing platforms that will get the reputation. If we don't get a high reputation on those things, we will be failing. So PLOS has managed to do a little bit of that. eLife is probably the best example in that thing, but that's just one or two examples. I think compared to so many journals. So I think that's one direction that I would like to push the funders and other communities to actually invest in. So I myself, I've kind of founded this Aperture using a society, like that Aperture platform is using the society as a backend, saying, okay, that's now the publishing platform of a society, and we're not going. We may subcontract to a company for doing review process and all those things, but we are in the driving seat. We know what we want to have in terms of research that are being published, how they are published, and all those things. So I think so. Those are the kind of principles on which I base this project. And the first one is high quality, because if we don't get the reputation, we will fail again. And then of course, open access, low cost is the diversity of publisher research objects, and community driven, because that's the society that is elected. I mean, the board of the society is elected. If you don't not happy with the way or things are going, you can vote. That's that's a great principle. The second thing I've worked on is more like a computational notebook repository and a preprint system with Pierre Bellec and Nicolas Stigoff, and this is one example where hopefully we're going to push the publishing landscape a little bit. With it requires platforms and investment, but I think it's a cool, really cool project. With the governance, that's the thing. So takeaway: community building of researchers through collaborative projects is really a thing that actually I think are underfunded still. Standards also are really the thing that allows people to talk to each other in an efficient way. In all the the computational standards, address incentives first. Think know who we are as researchers, such that, and what are our motivations to be able to act on that research community, of course. And then I would say funds, try to fund like things that are hopefully have a good governance, has some potential, and not and sometimes some projects have to die. I think that's it. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.